Good morning. Bright and early, sun's just rising up out here. Maine, the state of Maine. Should you move there? The land of lobster. Vacation land. The land of people that talk funny. Independence, self-sufficiency. Is that right for you? Should you be considering Maine is the perfect place for you to live? Welcome to Goose Pond Hideout with Rob. I want to be the voice for your freedom. All right, Maine. Excuse me. The state of Maine. Just so you have an understanding of where I'm coming from, is when I was around 30, 31 years old, I moved up to Maine, and I lived up there for pretty close to 20 years. My wife, my better half, grew up in Maine, and that's where she lived up there. We have kids, our children live up in the state of Maine, and we even have some grandkids up there now. This is a photo I took of a moose walking right through our backyard, right out in the middle. We see them all the time up there in Maine. Something you need to get used to. So I am very familiar with living in the state of Maine. And the first thing we'll do, like some pluses and minuses, the pros and cons, if you will, of moving up and living in the state of Maine. What's it like? And the first thing that's hopefully pretty darn obvious is fall foliage is amazing in the state of Maine. Northern New England is considered the most beautiful foliage on the planet, basically. It's better than anywhere else on earth. So the foliage, if you like fall foliage, I mean, Maine is just unbelievable up there with the colors and everything like that. On the downside, in the spring, you've got black fly season and mosquitoes that are just unbelievable. They just eat you alive. And it's funny because when I first moved up to Maine, in the spring, I didn't understand why people were out raking their yard and doing all kinds of outdoor activities when there was still, like snow on the ground. And I learned real quick that as soon as it starts to get nice out, you want to be outside doing stuff, because once the black flies arrive, you can hardly stand to be outdoors. And I mean, they are nasty up there. So there's no easy way to put it. Where like here in our little corner of paradise, I mean, mosquitoes in the spring, March, April-ish, but I might see a few out there, and one might land on me in the evening or that, but they're nothing here. And up there, I mean, you like run from the door of your house to the door of your car. So the black flies can be pretty darn awful up there. On the upside, Maine is the most forested state in the country. That's right, of all the states, Maine is most forested, and it's about 90% forest land up there. And to give you a perspective of the size of Maine is the other New England states, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. All 5 of those states fit inside of the state of Maine. So Maine really is a huge, huge state. And the population's like 1.4 million. And this is one of the things that's kind of important is, well, I mean, hopefully everything I'm talking about here today is important, but the population is really steady. It's going up really, really slowly. It hasn't changed much over the years. And that's kind of a big deal because like where we live here, the population is just exploding. People are building right and left everywhere. I mean, it's just crazy land down here. So that's the thing, if you get a nice piece of property up in Maine, is from people-wise, it's probably not going to change too much over the years. It's an older population, and again, about 1.4 million, 1,400,000 people, and the population is not growing very fast there, which to me, that means whatever you buy, there's a good chance that it's going to pretty much stay the same, you know, over down the road. It's not going to change a lot as time goes by. Now, another thing that's kind of a negative up there is it is dark in the wintertime. Augusta, Maine, the capital of Maine, is almost on the 45-degree latitude. And I don't want to turn this into a geography lesson, but the equator obviously is 0. Where the equator is 0. And the North Pole up there is 90 degrees, you know, all the way north. So equator, North Pole, and the middle of Maine, Augusta capital, is almost halfway between the equator and the North Pole. So in the wintertime, when you get close to the solstice and that, through December and January, the sun, I mean, you get like 8 hours of daylight. And not only that, is the sun like comes up and it like barely skirts above the horizon, like it doesn't even get above the trees, and then drops back down. So it is very dark up there. So that's something, if you have that photosensitivity thing, that's something that you want to really be thinking about if you're going to move up there, is how dark it is. Now, on the other hand, the summers, even though they're really short, the summers are amazing. I mean, it like never gets above 90 degrees up there. I mean, in the 20-ish years that I lived there, I could probably count on my hand the number of times we hit 90 degrees where we lived way up in Maine. And heck, you hardly get above 80. And even if it gets kind of, quote, warm by Maine standards during the day, is at night the temperature drops way down. And again, I lived up there for almost 20 years, no AC. Had no AC at the house. I had it, you know, where I worked, but during the day. But yeah, at the house, no AC, no air conditioning. And I mean, down here, I mean, I couldn't even imagine here in the South with the heat and humidity. We're going to be, it's actually kind of nice today that barrel hurricane's going by, but so it sort of cooled us off a little bit. But by the end of the week, the next few days, we're going to be up in triple digits again. So nice, cool, short summers. And that's just to mention it too. That'd be the thing if you lived up there, is gardening. You know, you got to think about, you got to get stuff right out early in the season, and cross your fingers and pray that you don't have a late frost, because you don't get a second chance at it up there, whatever, you know, you're trying to grow. So that's the thing. Maine is unfortunately a high tax state. That's probably, if it's not the main reason, Maine, it's one of the most important reasons of why we ended up leaving. Is she's got a pretty high property tax, a rather progressive income tax, a substantial sales tax, you know, and on and on and on. Fees for things, hunting, fishing licenses and stuff. They just get you coming and going. And it's not a high income state. You know, the average income in the state is pretty darn low. So, you know, that's an important thing. I don't know, I just popped into my head, but when I was at the beginning there in the introduction, I was talking about Maine. But is, if you want to, you know, talk like you're a Mainer, is one of the main things that they do up there is they, hang on a second. Tank, go on. Sorry about that. Is I say it like this, is you drop your R's and you save them for later. So if you want to say lobster, you say lobster. You take the ER off and you put an AH on there, lobster. And then you take that ER and you put it in your pocket and you save it for later. And maybe at the end of the week, on the weekend, you go out for pizza. But in Maine, you go out for pizza. You stick your ER onto the end of it there. So lobster and pizza. And that plays into the people in Maine actually are really friendly. They're friendly, nice, self-sufficient, independent thinking people. They don't want to be told what to do. So you don't want to go to Maine and then tell them how you used to do things in the place that you came from, because that's not going to fly real big. And they may seem standoffish and not terribly friendly when you first move up there. And the reason for that is, like the whole winter thing, in that is they want to make sure that you're going to survive the winter and then stick around. They don't want to invest in a friendship and then in March you're like heading back to wherever you came from because you can't stand the winters up there. And that's a really big thing. I saw a lot of that, where people from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York would move up to Maine, and then after one winter they're like, we're out of here, we're heading back to where we came from. So, and then Maine is it's considered the safest state in the country. And I mean, it depends on how you measure safety, I guess, but Maine is very, very safe. It is, again, crime almost is non-existent up there.